Hi guys, Richard Liew here, editor at NZ Entrepreneur magazine, and today I'm delighted to be talking to Chris Bennett. Chris is the founder, or one of the co-founders, of the leather children's shoe company, BOBUX, which I'm sure many of you have probably heard of. So Chris is joining us today from Auckland. Thank you very much for being here, Chris.
Pleasure to be here.
For those who haven't heard of BOBUX, can you just tell us very quickly what it is you guys do, what do you make, and who do you do it for?
Yeah, we create little children's shoes from newborn up to around 7 or 8 years old. They're all designed in New Zealand, obviously made offshore, and we spend a lot of time designing shoes that are good for kids' feet, for growing kids' feet, that kids want to wear, basically, that are cute, attractive, got good aesthetics. Gives them the freedom to get out there and discover the world.
Viewers out there who do know of BOBUX, what you may not know is that this year BOBUX celebrates 30 years in the market, in existence. And so this is a really cool opportunity, Chris, to sort of get you to cast your mind back. Can you tell us a bit about the genesis, I guess, for the idea? When you made the first set of shoes, children's shoes, had you made anything like that before?
No, not at all. In fact, I was an architect originally, so design's always been a passion of mine. But at that stage, I had a little daughter, Chloe, who's now grown up, of course, and I made a pair of shoes for her. Basically, she had a pair of cloth shoes that had laces, and from a father's perspective, it was pretty frustrating because you can't. It's very hard to do a kid's foot with laces because their feet are moving all over the place. So I pulled out the laces, put in some elastic and tied them on at the end, basically, and that was really how the concept started. Yeah.
And I believe you've got still one of the original of the pair that you made for Chloe.
Yes. So I show it to you.
Yeah, please.
And there it is. You can see that. So that was the original we made. We made quite a few of those ones. And so at the very beginning, it was pretty much one style of shoe with many different colors and combinations and different designs on the front of the shoe. But it was a single design product, basically. Yeah.
So did you actually go through the process of sitting down and putting your architecture's skills to work and making a design for these shoes? Or did you just...
I did some pretty basic designs that were pretty average, and you can see it there. And then later on, I was lucky to come across a friend of mine, actually, who'd been with Clark's Footwear, worked in New Zealand here, and he looked at my shoes and said, "Chris, these are terrible." He said, I've got to fix these up," which he did. So he repatterned them, adjusted all the different sizing and grading, and from then on, the shoe was a much better construction, because I knew nothing about making shoes, of course. I knew lots about how buildings were put together, but not too much about shoes and footwear, and so that's been a true learning experience. Yeah.
BOBUX today you're selling your shoes in, I believe it's over 40 countries around the world.
That's right.
So a true New Zealand export success story there. Looking back though to those very early days, what was the process that you went through from the time you sort of, I guess, had your prototype shoes there, and you actually got them into the hands of a paying customer? Can you tell us a bit about what you did in those early days?
So in the very early days, we made a whole lot of shoes. I took them down to Victoria Park markets, which was like a handicraft type market down there. And I booked it out for a weekend for a couple of days. I took down about 60 pairs, and within about 2 hours, I'd sold them all. So I had no more stock. And so that was a bit of it was a good shock to have. And I think it was just listening to the feedback from a lot of the people who bought the shoes. And I had them in little plastic boxes. They looked like a perfect little gift. Again, the designs were pretty rough, and but there were lots of color in there. And so we went back the next week and did the same thing again. And people started to come back to buy the shoes. So their friends had told them about it. So after that, I realised that there's probably a good opportunity here, and approached some of the stores around Auckland. Did that myself and got them into some stores in Auckland, and then found an agent in Wellington and one in Christchurch, and started selling them around New Zealand. And my wife and I had come from Australia, so Sydney was our home. Had been our home for 8 years. So I said to my wife, I'm going to jump on an airplane, see if we can flog these things in Australia as well. And so I went over there, and Trade New Zealand actually helped us locate a distributor based in Sydney who distributed other products as well, and then started to distribute ours. And they had agents in each state, and it sort of went from there. And so that's how we got started. And then the third market was the UK, and a Kiwi lady had come to New Zealand to visit a family, and she came across BOBUX, and one day she rang me up. She said, I'm Remy, can I come and see you? So she came around and said, I want to do this in the UK. So that's how that started. So.
And so from the first market days down at Victoria Park Market through to that connection in the UK, how long was that period?
It was probably just over, probably about a year and a half.
So at what stage did you go from, I guess, hand crafting at home, I'm guessing at home somewhere, to realizing that you needed to ramp things up?
Well, I was very lucky. I was driving past a factory down in Glen Innes, and there was a clicker, a leather cutter, and I went in there and saw him, and I said, this is what I want to do. And I said, do you know any sewers? So that's how that started. So we started with one sewer, one leather cutter, and then I think we ended up eventually with about 35, 40 machinists. They're all working from home. They're all home workers. We were basically working out of the basement of our garage, so we had nowhere for them to work. So they're all out workers, and we were shipping couriering the work backwards and forwards around Auckland.
Now, as a founder of the business, not having had any experience in terms of what you were getting yourself into, what were some of the biggest challenges that you found personally as you went through this process, especially as you started to grow overseas? To
be honest with you, I didn't realise the amount of time commitment. I was basically working 6-7 days a week, starting at 8 o'clock in the morning, working till midnight. It was crazy stuff. Because I was doing all the design, I was doing all the production, I was doing all the marketing, all the branding, all the finance. So it took there was a cost attached to that. And of course, I knew nothing about any of these things. So luckily, I've always been an avid reader. So I read a lot. I read a lot about finance, read a lot about marketing and branding, and figured out how to export. So all these things were new to me, and they were big challenges. And I think at a certain point in time, I realized that I couldn't do this all on my own. So I then started to bring in other people to help and grow the business that way.
One of the excuses we hear most often from people who maybe have business ideas but seem to forever put them off is that, well, I can't start this business because I don't have any business experience. And what I love about this story, Chris, is essentially you've just totally refuted that and shown that absolutely you can go about building a business, even if you don't know about all these things. As you said, you had no experience with sales, marketing, finance, manufacturing, but you obviously had the keenness and the willingness to learn as you went. What advice would you give to anyone watching this who is still maybe in that camp? They've got this idea, but they're sort of telling themselves, well, I'll do it one day when I have the experience.
Just start. And so I think ignorance is actually a good thing. If I knew what I know now, I probably would never have started. And back yourself, and get yourself a good accountant, get yourself a good bank, get yourself a good lawyer, and surround yourself with people that are experts in these other areas that you're not an expert. Because I was never an expert in anything. When I first started, I remember someone said to me, well, where's your cash book? And I said, what's a cash book? Technology's been a big help in this business. Back in 1991, technology was just starting with the internet. and I had a 386 and an accounting software package, and all of a sudden I could discover that all of a sudden I was an accountant. You know, I could push a few buttons and out would spit a statement, and out would spit the GST report, and I thought, this is fabulous. You know, who needs to train to be an accountant? You know, something like that. You know. So I've learned a lot over time, and a lot of people have been very supportive and have helped me along the way. And I don't think if you don't have that support from these other experts, it's a tough journey, very hard. So yeah, learn to listen to a lot of people who have all the knowledge, and most people are really willing to share that knowledge as well. You know, they can see the journey you're on, and just be humble about it and say, look, can you help me out here, or can you help me out there, or what does that mean? And don't be scared to ask what could be silly questions, but just ask. Because if you ask the right question in the right way, it's like unlocking the knowledge that you don't otherwise know. And yeah, that's what I would say to people. Just start and don't. And I guess for me, as the issue of failure wasn't really of much concern, to be fair. When you're starting out, what have you got to lose? Nothing, you know. I mean, I started this business with an overdraft of about $500, I think.
So after all this time, what keeps you sort of inspired or enthused?
Look, I think that for me personally, I got the business to a certain level, and I realized that, and I think this is what a problem a lot of founders end up, that they can't get the business beyond a certain, they hit a ceiling. And I realized that I needed to step back from the business and bring in a whole nother layer of management that had the skills that I don't have, to then take it to another level. And I think that's what we've found. We've had Andrew, our CEO, with us for 5 or 6 years now, and he sort of elevated the whole game. We've got another layer of management in there, and they're all experts in their field. I mean, look, if I was to apply for a job there, I wouldn't get a job there anymore, you know. And it's just moved on so much. But the business has moved on a lot. I think there's a lot more upside. I think there's a lot more opportunity out in the global marketplace. And I think we've got a pretty good why to our business. We're focused on the children, making sure the footwear is designed for their benefit, for their health, and also with the parents in mind as well. So I just think we've got a great team.
Now we've invited in to join Chris, Andrew Sharp. Andrew is the CEO for BOBUX, and thank you for jumping into the conversation, Andrew.
No, thanks for having me, Richard.
We're celebrating the 30th birthday, but I also understand that there's a sort of a new product as well to mark, I guess, the occasion. I'm not sure whether that's by design or coincidental, but obviously as the business has evolved, consumers have evolved, you know, our awareness around sustainability has grown, and I believe you're putting out a new line, and they're actually made out of bamboo, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I guess first of all, just wanted to say, this is our 30th year, and I think your audience will know more than anyone that 30 years in business is a really long time, particularly in New Zealand. And so it's a huge honour to be a part of this journey so far for myself and for our team. We're all absolutely rapt that Chris and Colleen 30 years ago decided to go forth and continue that journey. So thank you. But yeah, so I guess the major tenet of what BOBUX does is that we listen to what consumers are thinking, what they're talking about, what some of their concerns are. And I guess for a long time now, we've seen this wave of sustainability that we need to be better ancestors to our great grandchildren. You know, if you think about that from multiple different places, I guess the Te Ao way of thinking about things, right? So we want to be great ancestors. And so how can we make sure that we are leaving the world in a better place? And that's what a lot of our consumers are starting to talk a lot more about when we go out to their homes and listen to them from all around the world, but particularly up in Europe. And so the first outcome of that was the shoe here called the Seedling. So it's made of 30% recycled rubber, that we go into the sole, and then the rest is natural rubber, and then, as you say, bamboo knit through the outer, and then some sustainable cotton on the inside, and some merino. And so, yeah, I mean, it's been an amazing process and a journey, and it actually started off with a New Zealand circularity workshop, which was hosted by Callaghan Innovation and the team at Circularity New Zealand, to say, well, how can we actually get products that once they come to the end of their life, we can do something with in that space as well.
And I believe there's an extra element that makes them even more special, in that for every pair sold, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's actually going to be a carbon offset element to that, with a tree being planted.
So we manufacture the majority of our products in Indonesia, and I'm sure you'll be aware of some of the challenges that Indonesia faces around the rainforests and things like that. And so one of the offset elements of this product is that for every pair that we sell, we will plant a tree in Indonesia, and then you can actually track where those trees are being planted, and we can actually go and see ideally the forest that we will repopulate, because of consumers wearing shoes that are better for their kids and be better for the environment as well.
Now, we can't really talk business and export without acknowledging one of the most, I guess, disruptive global events ever, that being the COVID-19 pandemic, which really bit in 2020. Still, we're seeing, massive flow-on effects in terms of disruption globally. Now, you export to over 40 different countries. My mind is boggling in terms of what that must have been like logistically, with the likes of lockdowns, disruption to transports and logistics. I imagine maybe some disruption to supply for manufacturing. Can you talk us through, I guess, what that's looked like for you as a company? What was the sort of immediate fallout? What did that look like? And what's sort of been your response? How have you, I guess, dealt with that, or even adapted to that?
Yeah, so I guess it hit just over a year ago, and it's forced to New Zealand. I suppose, like everywhere, there was the biggest challenge was the uncertainty, and making sure that we were doing things that was going to give us a longevity around what we were doing. So immediately we had orders in the bank, as it were, that we were manufacturing product to meet. We cut some of those orders with the expectation that not everyone would get through this, because if you think back to sort of March, April 2020, that was what we were all hearing, right? We were hearing stories about the thousands of deaths and so on, and shops closing and people losing their jobs and so on. And so I guess that uncertainty and that fear sparked us into creating multiple different scenario plans, which said, right, from a best case scenario through to a worst case scenario, where I think we had 5 different plans in place, with triggers and buttons. So if this happens, then go to plan B. If this happens, go down to D, and so on. Fortunately, we actually never got to past plan B, so that was good. But as you say, the pandemic is not finished by any stretch of the imagination, and we can talk about the supply chain challenges in a moment. But yeah, so scenario planning was probably the first step. We had an amazing support group and network in the New Zealand Trade Enterprise. We banked with the BNZ. They were incredibly supportive through the process. And then we've got a professional board as well. And I think that's been one of the big challenges, or at least assistances for me as a CEO, is that we were always able to bounce these things off people in other places that have got different experiences. And so they can sit up a little bit higher on the hill, as it were, and look out a bit further while we're stuck in the weeds in that space. So that's probably where we started. As I say, it then didn't eventuate that we needed to use all of those plans, but having them gave us the confidence that we could go forwards, and knowing that if this happened, then we would just go to this next level. And I think we communicated that really well to our staff and made sure that they were really aware of everything that was going on at the time, because, you know, I think the mental health of our people was probably the most critical thing through the process, that we needed to make sure that they felt that we knew what we were doing, I guess, even though now we can sort of go back and say, yeah, look, we were making it up as we went along, but at the time they seemed to trust us, which was great. And so, yeah, so that was that process, and then we just traded our way out of it. We had already started a big shift prior to the pandemic hitting to digitize the business. I guess, again, listening to our customers, looking at the trends that were coming, looking at the trends around work, and in terms of who was coming into the workforce with the Gen Ys, the Millennials and Gen Zs. And so we'd started digitizing the business anyway. And so when the pandemic hit, I think we just sort of said, oh, well, everyone go home, get your chair, take your laptop home, and we're working from home from now on. And then not one call went through to our IT department with challenges through the whole lockdown, which was pretty phenomenal. Particularly because given we've got staff in 6 countries around the world. So yeah, so I suppose that was all part of the process that we were happy that we'd already done. Chris and their foresight a long time ago had started our first website in 1996, I think it was. And so web was something that was part of our strategy. And so the online and digital space, we just really started ramping that process up to the point where web's a much bigger part of our business now than it had been in the past. And I think that gave us that continuity in terms of contact with customers, to see what they were wanting and then to see how they were wanting it. Yeah, and then we just started working with our partners. Got great partners in Mainfreight, who we have a warehouse and 3PL system with Mainfreight in New Zealand and in Texas. We've got a great partner up in the UK and in Oxford, who's been doing our logistics for, I want to say, good 20 years, yeah, I think. Yeah. And she is an amazing partner for us and communicates really well. And then we've got warehouses in Indonesia and the Netherlands. The challenge was, obviously, as COVID came through, it wiped out a large chunk of the workforce from all of those places, apart from New Zealand, fortunately. So I think that was a bit of a challenge to get product out, but consumers were really forgiving about that, right? You know, everyone, you know, you don't need your shoes the next day. You know, there wasn't an event coming on. It was more so you could get out and enjoy life and enjoy, hopefully, the sunshine with your kids and get them out on the bikes, get them out running around and keep that continuity of life with your children. And so I think the consumers understood that, and our warehouse and 3PL partners did an amazing job of getting that through.
I'd like to delve in a bit around the relationship between you two as founder and CEO. You know, one of the things we hear a lot from founders is, you know, when you've put your blood, sweat, and tears, as you point out, hours, days, years of your life into building something. And the time comes where maybe one day you realize you either are not up for it anymore or you need help. What was that like for you, Chris? Was it like an overnight sort of revelation where it just dawned on you one morning that, my goodness, I need some help here and I need to hand the executive reins over on a day-to-day side? Or was that strategically part of the plan, you know, that something you've been working to for a number of years?
Yeah, I think the business, there were certain elements of the business that was quite dependent on me. And I think that devalued the business. You know, we've got a lot of distributors, a lot of retailers, and we have a lot of staff. And I felt it was better to de-risk the business by me stepping back from it. And I think that was the right thing to do. I think for a lot of founders, that's quite hard because they lose control. And but I was pretty determined. I'd spoken to my wife about it, and we were pretty determined that we would both step out of the business, establish a board of directors. We have 4 directors on the board, and we'd bring in someone like Andrew as our CEO to run the business in a professional way that would only add value to the business. Probably it was difficult at the very beginning. Probably Andrew wouldn't disagree with that. You know, there's a few circumstances where it came up where probably I got more involved than what I should have, but I think that was just that transitionary stage of handing something over that I've been so deeply involved in to another team. And I think once I saw that they were more than capable, in fact, doing a much better job than me, then I became more relaxed about it and eased off. And I think, you know, I think the really important thing is to have a really competent board of directors who manage the governance. And I think probably in all fairness, our board does more than just the governance. They're actually good business advisors with good experience in finance and marketing and brand. And I think that's very invaluable. And I think that way the board can also make sure that the company's still moving in the right direction. Because I think what can happen is that you can bring other people and all of a sudden the business can start to slide off the left or the right somewhere, and it can lose its focus very quickly unless you somehow have a board that maintains that focus and maintains those controls. So I think we've been pretty lucky. I think the process has worked very, very well. I wouldn't have it any other way.
In your experience or your opinion, when is the right time for a founder to sort of put their hand up and say, okay, it's time for me or us co-founders maybe to really seriously consider stepping aside, getting out of our own way, de-risking the business, as you point out, you know, because often the biggest risk to any business is the person who started it. You know, is there a right time, or when is the right time for people watching, you know, business owners watching and maybe considering this? How do you know when is the right time?
Well, I think every business is different because every business will be at a different stage of its development. But I think it's really up to the founders to actually take a close look at themselves and think, well, actually, I've taken the business as far as I can get it, and acknowledge, and that's the hardest part, is to actually acknowledge and accept that they can't take the business any further, and also accept there's a ceiling to where you can take it to. I mean, I'm not very good on the detail. I've got lots of great ideas, but I'm not a detailed person. So for me just to stay involved would be a danger and a risk to the business. You know, I don't have the disciplines that professional managers bring to the organisation, and I think if more founders just took the ego part out of it and realised they're actually doing this not for themselves but for their customers and all the other stakeholders in their business and all the people they employ as well. I think they have a duty to acknowledge when their time is up, and otherwise their business simply will lose value over time. And it's not noticeable, you know, day to day you won't notice it, but over a longer period of time you'll see the value start to slip out of the business. And at some point in time they probably want to sell their business. Well, then if they haven't managed that process properly, they won't probably realise the sort of return they want to get on all those inputs very early on when they perhaps started those businesses.
Andrew, I want to bring it back to you, and at risk of putting you in even more of a hot seat, what might your advice be to CEOs working with founders, and how in your experience might that be different to CEOs working, let's say, for a well-established company where the founder's already long gone?
I mean, I think, and Chris sort of touched on it anyway, I think it's about being very, very clear as to what is the goal. What are you trying to do? The same with anything in life, right? If you can be very, very clear as to what the vision is, what the mission is, what are you actually trying to achieve at the end of whatever this next piece is, then you can always come back to that as your founding agreement, that your founding document, as it were, and to say, hey, look, you know, you brought me here to do this thing. Do we still agree that that's what we want to do? And if we do, then great. This is the way. And then it's about negotiating about how we're going to do that thing. Whereas I think if you're not really clear early on as to exactly what you want as a founder, talking as a CEO, coming in to say, like, hey, Andrew, what I want you to do is do this. Okay. And then we can go off and do that. Whereas I say, if you're not really clear on that, you might end up sort of doing things that diverge away from the actual goal of the founders, and then that's going to end in tears. And so I think just spending that extra time at the front end, so not just being in a rush to get it done, but spending that extra time. And I think we talked a good 3 or 4 months before I started about, hey, what do you actually want me to do when I come in? You know, what's your end goal in this in 2, 3, 5, 10, 20 years time, 50 years time? And then once I had that clarity, then I was able to enact the way that I would achieve those things.
Chris, listening to Andrew there, you got any last sort of comments to add on those lines?
Oh, yeah, look, I think you're right. It's definitely a partnership between the founder and the CEO. And Andrew and I, we have a board meeting once a month, and we usually meet every week or 2 weeks. And for me, that just gives us the visibility of what's going on in the business. Because obviously, you know, I've had experience over the last 3 years, quite a lot of the things that come up, we've already experienced or have some knowledge of. But I think it's just having that visibility. There's no surprises. We sort of know what's going on an ongoing, even though I'm not involved on a day-to-day operational basis. You know, Andrew will always come along on you know, every couple of weeks, and we'll have a chat about some of the issues that we need to talk about, either at the board or outside the board, whatever. And I think that just keeps things on the level.
Well, guys, look, thank you so much for talking to us today. And there's been some fascinating insights from both the founder side and the CEO side. Thank you, Andrew. You know, all the best for the next 30 years, and congratulations. Looking forward to watching the story grow and evolve. Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Richard.
Thanks, Richard.
Cheers.